Chief White House correspondent Major Garrett is in Washington for us. And Major, you just heard Donald Trump say, well, I'm not going to lead the riots, but they could occur, right, if he gets to the convention with the most delegates if he doesn't get the nomination. Isn't this kind of in line with the same provocative rhetoric that we keep hearing that critics also say incited the violence in the first place?
Well, look, this is an exercise in semantics, and language does matter. How you use it, how you deploy it does matter in this campaign. And there's no sense that I have from Donald Trump that he meant riot in the sense of mass violence or something of that kind. But Donald Trump is very flexible with his language and uses it in a way to be edgy. Well, in this atmosphere, edginess carries with it lots of larger consequences. I don't think he's talking about threatening riots. What I think he's trying to say, and I think it's a legitimate point, if Donald Trump arrives in Cleveland with more delegates than anyone else, having won New Hampshire, having won South Carolina, Virginia, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, Illinois, a lot of very important states, not just in a primary context, but in a potential national campaign, and he is denied the nomination, even though he is the one closest in delegate acquisition to the magic number of 1,237, his supporters are going to be angry. They're not going to like that. And they're either going to walk out of the convention hall in Cleveland, or they're going to do something else to say, we're displeased. I think that's what Trump is driving at. And that is a material fact. No one can deny that if the convention were to go in another direction, even though Donald Trump numerically were on the cusp of obtaining it outright, there would be some degree of tumult. That is plainly true. But what Trump doesn't often understand, particularly lately, in a political campaign is the language you use and the words you use can not only illustrate, but they can inflame. And there is a fine line between the two, and oftentimes he goes on the other side of it.
Major, throughout this whole political campaign, we've talked about candidates in terms of the lanes that they're in. And first it was establishment versus non-establishment. Then things got whittled down. It was Trump and everyone else in another lane. Now there's three men standing. We have Trump. He's the outsider. He's the businessman who just happens to find himself on the road to the White House. There's Kasich, the adult in the room, keeping things positive. But what about Ted Cruz? Where is his lane? He's not exactly establishment.
Right, and as we've discussed, and I've made the point before, this is a false construct in many respects. There's only one lane. Everyone's in it, and they're all trying to get the votes and the delegates that come from the votes that you acquire. And everyone is doing the same essential thing, competing against one another. Now, it is only three candidates now, and John Kasich has defined himself as someone who doesn't want to, quote-unquote, get down on the mud. Donald Trump is the most disruptive force American politics has seen in several generations and is a pure outsider and a pure novice, and he brings all of the unpredictability of that. And Ted Cruz has said all along he is the consistent conservative, the one that conservative grassroots Republican voters who have long been displeased by moderate nominees, go back to Bob Dole in 1996, John McCain in 2008, Mitt Romney in 2012. I'm your guy. I'm a conservative. I know what you believe. I will carry out your wishes if I'm elected president. That's where he's going to stay. What we don't know is how the voters in future primary and caucus states are going to look at these three alternatives, because they're very distinct. You have Trump and his movement, you have Cruz and his conservatism, and you have John Kasich saying, I have experience in Washington, I have an experience as a governor, I'm not going to get down on the mud, and I'm the one who can actually win a swing state like Ohio. Of course, he's only won one state, he needs to win more, but how voters choose between these now very starkly different options is going to be the next phase and the next cycle of this campaign.
Well, Major, along the lines of what you're talking about right now, but also on CBS this morning, you said that John Kasich is fighting to stay relevant through July's Republican National Convention. Despite that one win in Ohio on Tuesday, is there a path for him at this point?
Not a mathematical path. He's already eliminated mathematically. He can't acquire enough delegates to win the nomination. But what he can do is deny Donald Trump the numerical majority to claim it outright by winning in places like Pennsylvania, Delaware, New York possibly, and other terrain that is geographically suitable to him. And Kasich now for the first time is raising enough money and deploying it rapidly to play in other places like Utah. He put up two new 30-second ads in Utah in advance of Tuesday's caucuses. So John Kasich now for the first time is beginning to have the revenue behind his campaign and developing name recognition to become a figure outside of the state of Ohio and try to take his message both in person and in a media strategy throughout the other states in this campaign. So he can't win the nomination unless it's a contested convention and he presents himself and is chosen as the compromise pick. He can't win it outright, but he can deny Trump the outright nomination by winning delegates that Trump otherwise would like to get, and that's why he still matters.
Major Garrett in Washington. Thank you, Major.
You got it.